In this video, I'm going to show you how to replace your lower ball joint on your Ford Ranger. It's located in your wheel well. All right, so we're going to use a 19mm socket and take the wheel off. Now we're going to take our wheel off. Using a 15mm socket, you're going to take out the caliper bolts. When you take out the top bolt, you want to hold on to your caliper and bracket. Now you can take off your caliper and bracket, hopefully. Ooh. Okay, so I'm going to use my caliper hanger and just find a place to put this and hang it off to the side. Make sure you're not putting any tension on your flex hose. All right, so now we can take off our rotor and set that off to the side as well. All right, using an 8mm socket, we're going to take out this bolt for your ABS sensor. All right, once that's out, we can start disconnecting these plastic clips that run along the frame towards the front of the truck. All right, I wouldn't recommend taking this out unless you really have to, or you are already replacing the ABS sensor, because you probably end up damaging it and then you'll be out, you know, another part. So disconnect it from the plug on the other end. All right, so I'm going to stick a screwdriver in there and open up these plastic holders and just take the wire out. Just follow this wire until you find the plug. It should be close to the nose of the truck. So you're going to push down this tab and then pull it out. After you do that, you can take out your wire gently and just put it in front. All right, so we're going to take our cotter pin out of our tie rod castle nut here. Just bend it up. You can usually push it out. You can add some penetrating oil if needed. We're not going to reuse this cotter pin, so. I'm using some wire cutters. All right, so now we're going to turn our wheel out so we can get to our nut a little better. All right, using a 22mm socket, long socket, in my impact gun, I'm going to take off this nut for the tie rod. So you're going to take a sledgehammer and you're going to hit right here, and that's going to pop the tie rod out. Put that off to the side. And now we're going to get our axle nut free. Okay, we're going to use a 32mm socket, axle socket for our axle nut. Now we're just going to push on this to make sure it's free. All right, using my wire cutters again, I'm going to bend this cotter pin so I can take it out for our lower ball joint castle nut. I'm going to throw that away. All right, using a 24mm socket, we're going to take off our castle nut for our lower ball joint. Okay, using a 15mm socket, we're going to take off this nut for our pinch bolt. I did put some penetrating oil on there previously, so I'm going to try to free up this bolt. I'm going to use a 13mm socket to spin the head around a little. And then I'm going to use a rubber mallet to bang on it as I pull it out. All right, so I'm going to use a pull jack, and I'm going to lift up my lower control arm to take the tension off the top control arm. And we're going to use a pickle fork in here to disconnect the ball joint from the knuckle. And we're going to bang on here and on here to take this pin out of the knuckle. All right, sometimes when you jack this up, you'll get lucky and it'll come out of this pinch bolt area. Looks like we got lucky on this one. If it doesn't come out, you're going to bang it here and it eventually will release. You may need a friend or a helper to pry up on this, which we're going to do a little bit of anyways when it's time to take this out. But they're going to have to pry up on this as you're hitting it, and it will release eventually. All right, another thing you're going to have to do is you're going to need a bungee cord or a ratchet strap to hold your axle in place for when this whole knuckle does come out of the vehicle. You don't want it just hanging out. So I'm going to get myself ready for when that happens, because sometimes things happen quickly. All right, so you're just going to thread on your nut before you start pickle forking the other side. Oh, looks like it popped. And it looks like it came out the top too. I gotta say, we got lucky here. Usually you gotta work at getting this out too. But this all came out together, so that's good. And it's a good thing we had a nut there, otherwise you would have lost your whole knuckle on the floor. So now I'm gonna take off this nut. Make sure your axle is supported with that bungee cord. And now we can put this on the bench. Okay, so now that we are done with the knuckle, we're going to move this up and out of the way so that we can hammer out the ball joint. Okay, so now we're going to take out our snap ring. I'm going to use snap ring pliers to do that. Let's see if it moves. It does. I'm just going to take that out. If yours doesn't move, you're going to want to tap it with a cold chisel in either direction. Put a little penetrating oil to take it off. All right, so I'm going to get all this goo off of the grease fitting so I can take this out so I can bang on the ball joint and get it out. All right, so it's like a 10mm. Using a wrench, and you just unscrew them. If you have a bleeder in there, you want to take it out before you start hitting the top of the ball joint. So you want to take a sledgehammer and you want to hit square in the middle of that ball joint. You don't want to veer off to either side of it because you're going to mushroom it out and then you'll never get it out. If you feel like you're not that good with a hammer, you might want to just press it out. You can also press it out. So now you're going to clean this up for your new ball joint. All right, so we are going to put our ball joint in. We need to use a ball joint press to do that. So I'm just going to hold it in there like that. You have to find the right combination of pieces. So you want it to fit through, but you also want it to press up here around this, and that's what's going to, this is going to push up to push that in. You're going to need this here so that it can fit through inside. So now that you have that set up, you're going to press in the ball joint. Tighten this down till it bottoms out, which is right about there. Back it off. Hold on to your press when you loosen it. You can take that down. All right, so now you're going to put your snap ring on. Just fit it in that groove. Just going to turn that way. We're going to put the knuckle back on the car and get the ball joint nut started. So I'm going to do this. All right, so once you get your knuckle on slightly with your nut, you can let your axle go a little bit. I would leave that bungee cord there just in case. And try to get your axle in. After you get your axle lined up, wiggle it in. So now we're going to put our axle nut on, just so it stays in there. All right, so if your pull jack went slightly askew, you might want to reposition it so you can push it back up, and that'll help you get the top control arm in. So I'm going to tighten up this nut on the bottom as I'm lining up my top. At this point, you can pry down on the top control arm. There we go. So you're going to use a long pry bar to pry that down. And then you're going to get your bolt ready. Feed it through. Put the nut on the other end. All right, so now I'm going to use a 15 millimeter on my nut and a 13 on the head and tighten this up. All right, so we're going to torque this to 41 foot-pounds. All right, now we can remove our pry bar. Okay, so now we're going to tighten up our lower ball joint nut. This is going to be torqued to 100 foot-pounds. So we're going to check to see where our cotter pin lives. And we're not going to loosen the nut, we're going to tighten it a little bit more until you have clearance through that hole. Right about there is good. I usually do the long end on the bottom, and then I just curl it around and up. You can use your wire cutters at this point if you need to. And then you can turn the other one to go around the nut. All right, so now we can take our pull jack right out of there. All right, so let's put our tie rod back in. Turn your knuckle where you need it. Let it drop in. Start our castle nut. And we will be torquing that to 52 foot-pounds. Now let's see if this lines up. If it doesn't line up, you're just going to tighten it a little bit more until it does. Do not loosen it. All right, now we're going to put our cotter pin in. Fold down the longer piece. And put the other piece around the side. All right, so we're going to snug this up, this axle nut, and then we're going to torque it to 162 foot-pounds. A good way to torque your axle nut is to place a pry bar between your two studs for your lug nuts, and then I'll keep that from spinning, and then you'll be able to torque it to 162 foot-pounds. All right, so now you can remove the pry bar. All right, it's a good idea to clean up your hub and your rotor before you put it back on. Get the surface rust off. You can put some anti-seize and put your rotor back on. I'm going to hold my rotor on with a lug nut. All right, so let's put our ABS wire back. I'm going to use our 8mm size bolt. Okay, once you snug that up. All right, so when you're feeding this wire through, make sure that it's sitting in this crease right here, like that. And it should be in there pretty snug. And just follow it up through the frame. Okay, so once you feed it down along the frame, you can plug it in. And you're ready to move on to the brake caliper bracket. All right, so turn your wheel out so that you can get your bracket on. Get your bolts ready. You take your caliper off the hanger. Make sure you don't kink that brake hose. And make sure your pads are where they belong. All right, so we are going to put our brake caliper bracket all together on. Okay, so now you want to get your bolts started by hand first, and then we'll tighten them up and torque them. We're going to snug these up with a 15mm socket and then torque them to 83 foot-pounds. So now we can take off the slug nut. I'm going to put our wheel on. I'm going to do it in a star-like pattern using a 19mm socket. All right, so we're going to torque our wheel to 100 foot-pounds using a 19mm socket, and we're going to do it in a star-like pattern. Do one more round, just because we had a few loose ones. It's good to double check.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.